Hi there. Let me show you how you're going to use LuitBiz BPM. BPM stands for Business Process Management, and using LuitBiz BPM you can manage all your processes and forms. This would be useful for companies who have a lot of different forms attached to their documents, and these forms need to be filled up, and either they are data entry forms or they need to be approved. So either way, whether they're workflow attached forms which need to be approved or they're just data entry forms, LuitBiz BPM can handle that. So let's see how to begin with this. So first you log into the system, and this system, LuitBiz TMS, is a completely responsive system, which means that you can log in using any device connected to the internet, whether it's a computer or a smartphone or a tablet. It doesn't matter. You just have to use your username and password to log into the system. So just let me log into the system, and in the system there will be one admin user and the others will be the BPM user. This particular user, Roland, is an admin user. So he sees this admin icon out here. So I go to the admin icon, I click on the admin icon, and I see this links for him out here. Now this admin can add multiple business locations, because LuitBiz BPM supports multiple business locations, which means that you can have multiple offices in different locations, and you can switch from one location to another for filling out your forms and for approving your forms with just one mouse click. But it's the job of the admin user to add the different locations, which we call companies. So to add a new location, he'll click on companies, and he'll click on add subsidiary companies. So now this particular this particular company, let's say I'm going to add the Los Angeles office out here for this particular company. So here I'm just going to put in the phone number of the Los Angeles office. Suppose I put 213-972-2345. Suppose this is the phone number. Now throughout the system, whenever there's a form that needs to be filled up, it's always divided into green section and blue section. Green section is always mandatory, where you need to always fill out the form fields in the green section. Blue section is optional, and you can fill it out later on by editing the different values of that particular entity. Now here I have 4 entities that I need to fill out. So suppose this is the second entity is the phone, third is country, and the last is the currency. So I fill out all this different 4 fields, and the rest of the fields I can fill it up later on. That's not a problem, and I hit on the submit button. The moment I do so and go to view companies, I see the list of companies that are already listed. First is the main office, which is called Wild Mint, let's say, and the next is a Los Angeles office, and this way they can add as many offices or as many locations as they want. There's no limit on that. Now after you add your different offices in LuitBiz BPM, what you can do is you can add your letterhead to the different forms that you would be filling out while printing. You can view the filled out forms along with your letterhead. So to add the letterhead, here itself the admin will add the letterhead image. To do that, let's say he can add different letterhead images for the different locations. Let's say he adds it for the main company, which is called Wild Mint. So against Wild Mint, click on this blue button, update markings. So once you click on update markings, you get to update your company's logo and your letterhead. So let's say you update both of them. You update the company's logo. Suppose you already have your logo saved in your computer. Suppose this is the logo of your company, and so the letterhead is, suppose this is the letterhead. Now both these files can either be in JPEG, GIF or PNG or TIFF format, and there's a particular size mentioned for it out here. Like for example, maximum size of the logo can be 200 pixels by 200 pixels, and for the letterhead the maximum size is 200 pixels in height and 600 pixels in width. So you need to make your logo and letterhead you have to adhere to these rules while making your letterhead. And once you click on the submit button, then if you click on the name of your company where you added the letterhead, and on the company markings, you can see that this is your company's logo and this is your company's letterhead. So now your company has both a logo and a letterhead, which has been added to the system. So that's the first job of the admin, okay, managing the company information. The next is managing the user information, to add users to the system. So to add users to the system, what the admin user would do is, again, green section is mandatory, blue section is optional, so he or she just needs to fill up the green section. Let's say he adds a user Trevor puts in his email. I'm just putting up a fictitious email. The email needs to go, the password needs to go in twice, and this user can have access to either one location or multiple locations. Let's say this user has access to multiple locations, and in the BPM module, users can either be BPM managers or they can be BPM executives. Now the managers are the ones who can actually make the forms and make the workflows, configure the forms, and the executives are the ones, the users, who can use the forms. They can fill up the forms, they can approve the forms, and so on and so forth. So basically, again, going back, the manager is the one who creates the forms and the workflows, and executives are the one who uses these forms and workflows and does the approval of the different forms. So let's assume that this particular user is an executive user, and the other fields are optional. So we move on to the next step. Since we said that this user has access to 2 locations, now the system is asking which is the default location. Let's say Wildmint is the default location of this particular user. Now if we go to view user list, we see that we have 2 users out here. Now this first user, Roland, if I want to give him access to the BPM module, I will click on edit user against his name, and I'll say, let's give him also access to both the users' locations, and let me make this user the BPM manager. The other one was executive, Trevor was an executive, and let's say Roland is a manager. And if I want, I can fill in the other fields. If not, it's okay, and I choose the default office for Roland, and now I have 2 users who have been added to the system. Now in order to have our approval system in place, let's say we add a couple of more users. Let me add a new user called Andrew. So password goes in twice. Let me give Andrew access to both the offices, and let Andrew also be an executive, because generally there's only one user in the BPM system who is a manager. Of course, you can have multiple managers, and the others are usually executive users. Let's say Andrew's default company is also Wildmint, and let me add another user called Lee, and let's say in the same way, just as I added the previous users, same process. Let's say Lee is also an executive, and I hit on the submit button and give his default office. So this way I can add as many users for whom I have actually purchased the licenses. So let me add the last user, because I'll need a couple of users to go through the approval process. So let me put a new user out here. And there she goes. And let's say she also has access to both the offices, and she is an executive, and move on to the next step and assign her default company as Wildmint. Now if I go to the view user list, I see that I have 5 users added to the system. So this way you can add as many named users for which you have purchased a license for LuitBiz BPM. So that's basically the job of the admin. First, to create the companies. Second, if you have just one company, don't bother about it. Don't bother about creating a new company, but to the existing company you need to add your markings, the letterhead and the logo. And the second job is to add the user and make the user either a BPM manager or an executive. So now we are done with the admin part. Now here in LuitBiz BPM, it's very easy to move from one module to another. You see this home icon on top, so once you click on it, the modules to which you have access appears in a drop-down menu. For example, this user Roland is a BPM manager. So the moment I click on this home icon, I see that there's a link to BPM Manager module. So I click on BPM Manager and I come to the dashboard of the BPM Manager. Here throughout the system, you will see that there is this audio player out here, which is basically the audio guide of what you can do on this particular screen. So every time you get stuck in any screen, you can play the audio player and it's going to guide you and tell you what you can do on that particular screen. Additionally, each screen has this video icon. So once you click on the video icon, all the BPM LuitBiz BPM guides open up for you in a separate window, and wherever you get stuck, you can just play that guide and go through it, and then it will teach you exactly how you'll go about using the system. And it's a very simple system. It takes a maximum time of 30 minutes to master the system, so it's that easy. So let's go back to our system. Now here in LuitBiz BPM, there are two types of forms that you can create. One are the data entry forms. Those are the forms which just need to be, where users just need to fill in data and store and share that data with the other users. Those are the data entry forms. These are mostly useful for quality departments or for entering certain data for certain for different verticals. The other is the workflow attached forms, where the user needs to fill in data and then send it for approval depending on the process defined by the BPM Manager. So there are two types of forms. Let's start with the simpler one, which is the data entry forms. Now when you are a BPM Manager, you get this extra link of forms setup. So here you have 4 links. Let me explain them one by one. First is drop-down menus. In LuitBiz BPM, you can define your drop-down menus and you can keep on reusing them. So, in different forms, you have different drop-down menus. So instead of defining them there in the form, you can previously define a lot of different default drop-down menus that you'll always be using in your forms, and you can keep on using and reusing them in your different forms. The next is workflows, where the BPM Manager can define the processes which would be, or the approval processes that would be linked to the different forms, and the forms would be following that particular workflow which is linked to it. Third link is forms with workflow. So these would be the forms that need approval, which would be linked with these workflows. And the fourth is forms without workflow, the data entry forms that I'll be showing you first. Now let's take up a particular form. Let's say we have this particular form out here which is let's say a data entry form. Let me open up a data entry form. So let's say we have a form that needs just data to be entered to the system. So I go here and I try to open up my data entry form. So it's opening. I have a form out here. It's a gate pass for vendors, so which I'll be creating it out here. So let's say this is the data entry form, which is a gate pass for vendors, and I want to create this particular form as a data entry form. So let's first put in the name of the form, which is gate pass for vendors. So I go here, forms without workflow, and before filling out, I see that there is no drop down menu that is required out here. It's just yes no, and we already have a yes no value type out there, so we don't need to define any drop down menus for making this particular form. So I'm making this particular form out here. Let's go to forms without workflow, add a form, and then first is the name of the form. So let's call it gate pass for vendors. You need to put a short form for that form, for this particular form, so that when the form is submitted, this short form would be used to number it. It's suppose here I have put GPV, so it will come as GPV//1/2. That way when people keep on submitting that form. And so number of sections in that form. So if I go here, I see that this has 2 sections, visitor information and product details. So I will say, okay, this form has 2 sections. And a number of documents that need to be attached while submitting this form. Since it's a gate pass, let's assume that you need to submit the picture of the vendor, the photograph. So I say okay. You can keep it as 0 if you want. If you don't need to submit any documents, keep it as 0. But let's say I keep it as 1. And now it's asking me company with which this custom form will be attached. Remember when I was adding the users, I added that this user Roland, his default company is Wild Mint. So it's showing Wild Mint as a default selection for me, but if I want, I can also add it to the Los Angeles office. So now I go ahead to step 2. Let's add it to Wild Mint office, and now I go ahead to step 2. Now in the first step I said that I need one document to be added. So now it's asking me what's the name of the document. So I say photograph of the visitor, and it's asking me whether this upload is mandatory. Let's say it is mandatory. So whenever you are uploading a particular data entry form, which is a gate pass out here, you need to upload the photograph of the visitor. And now it's asking me, since I said it has 2 sections, it's asking me the name and names of the 2 sections and certain other details about it. So I go back to my form out here, and I see that the name of the first section is visitor information. So I put it as visitor information. Now it is asking me what type of section is this? Is it sequential or is it tabular? If I go back to my form, I see that this first section is sequential and the second section is tabular. So I put it as sequential, and it's in the first position. Position number is 1. Then the second section is product details. So I go ahead and put in the name as product details, and as I mentioned earlier, this is a tabular section. So I go ahead and say that this is a tabular section and its position number is 2. Then I move on to the third step. So now it's asking me the first section, which is visitor information, which is sequential, how many fields are there in that section? So I go ahead and I see that there are 4 fields. So I select 4 out here. Now for the second section, which is product details, which is tabular, it is asking me how many rows are there in that particular table. I see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has 5 rows. So I say, okay, it has 5 rows, and is row name required? So I don't have anything written out here. So I don't have anything, product 1, product 2 out here. I'm just going to write the product name out here in this particular column. So I don't require a row name. So I say row name is not required. And number of columns out here is 1, 2, 3. So I say that number of columns is 3. So I have filled out my details out here. Now I move on to the next step. So now it's asking me, you said that in the first section, visitor information, which is sequential, it has 4 fields. What other fields? Define them. First is date and time. So I go ahead and say the first field is date and time. And what is the field type? We have a date and time field type. So we select that. And it's not a drop down menu. Is this field mandatory? We say, okay, yes, this is mandatory. We want to know when that person has come in. Second field out here is name. So we select that particular field. We write it out here, and since it's a name, we'll make it as varchar, which will give us a small area like this to enter the data. And let's say we want this also mandatorily. The third field out here is company. So let's say we put in the company. Let's select it as text so that we can put in more information about the vendor's company. If we put it as varchar, we'll get a smaller field like this, and if we put it as text, we'll get a larger area to fill out more information about the company that this vendor has come from. And let's say this is also, yes, I want to know the information. And the next field out here is designation. So what's the designation of this person who has come in from the vendor's company? Let's put it as varchar, and let's say this is mandatory. Okay, let's put it as mandatory. Now coming to the second section, which is product details, which is a tabular section. There we said that it has 3 columns. Now it's asking me what are the 3 columns. First column is called product name. So we put in as product name, and we put it as varchar. We can have a small area like this where we can put in the product name. And is this column mandatory? Let's say for the time being, no. You can either say yes or no. The second is details, the details of the product. So let's put it as text so that we can put in more information about the product that he has come up with. And this is also, let's keep it at no, it's not mandatory. And the third is product sealed. So whatever product he has gotten for us, is it sealed? So the person at the gate checks whether all the products are sealed, and he can put in a yes or no, because here, as you see, it says I want a yes or no entry, and I already have a data type which is yes or no. So I select that, and then I hit on the submit button. So the moment I do so, and then I click on view active forms, I see that this form gate pass for vendors has been added, and with the logo, with the letterhead, and these are the two sections: visitor information and product details. Remember, the first field out there was date and time. So once you click on the icon next to date and time, you can select the date and time, and you can enter the data. The name is a varchar, company is a text area, designation is again a varchar. Again, for the second section, product name is text. It's varchar, and we have 5 rows out here. Details is text, and is product sealed? We have a yes no on a radio button which the users can select. So now we see that our form is ready. Now if I go back to the list, I see that I have made this form as a BPM manager. Now I need to share this form so that the other users can use this form. So I click on share, and I can share with the users whom I want to fill this form. I might not want all my users to be able to fill this form. I might just want, let's say, Andrew and Lee to be able to fill this form. Okay, I might not even want myself to fill this form. So if I do this, and then if I go back to the BPM dashboard, I'll see that non-workflow forms which are available. If I go here, I see that nothing is available for me, but suppose I log out as Roland and log in as Lee, with whom I shared that form, or Andrew. Since Lee is not an admin user, so he just sees this BPM icon, and of course LuitBiz help icon, it's seen by everyone. It's a direct connection support ticket system with us. Whenever our clients have a problem, they can click on LuitBiz help, and it's a support ticket system. It's a normal support ticket system where they can add a ticket and it comes to us and we get back to you. Now suppose, let's see, Lee wants to go to his module, which is a BPM module. So he clicks on BPM executive module, since he's a BPM executive, and sees that whatever the is there available for him on his dashboard. So he clicks on available forms, and he sees that gate pass for vendors, it's available for him. So if he wants to submit this form, or if he wants to fill in data to this form, he clicks on submit form. Then he puts in the the date and time, name of the person, let's say suppose this is the name of the person, and so let's say this is the address of the office. Suppose this is the address of the office, and let's say. So now here, whenever I was filling out the form, I see that whatever fields I mentioned as mandatory has a red asterisk against it. So I have to fill this fields out mandatorily. But when in the second section, you might remember that I said none of the fields are mandatory. So none of the fields are I need to fill in. None of them have a red asterisk next to it. But let's say we have this particular one product that just come to deliver. Then suppose that's the name of the product, and let's say You can have as much details about it, and is the product sealed, so you can check whether the product is sealed or not, and if it's a yes, you can put a yes, if it's no, you can put a no. And remember when we said that the photograph of the visitor is essential, so we click on photograph of the visitor, and we want to actually take the photograph of the visitor. If we are using it via mobile device, you can actually take the photograph of the visitor while filling out the form. Suppose Lee is using it via a mobile, and Lee can fill out the information and put in the photograph of the visitor and hit on the submit button. So now if Lee goes to form size submitted, he will see that he has submitted one form which is with all this information, and whatever documents, photograph of the vendor, whatever he attached, he can view that also. Suppose this is the photograph he had taken, and you can come back here. So if I go back to the list, if I go back to the detail form, and if I want to print this, I can click on print, and I can see the printed version of this particular form that I filled out. And now after filling out this form, I can also, if I have other related forms, now here I have just one form. If there are other related forms that I had already filled up, I can add them to it, and I can have a bunch of related forms together. So now that is the data entry form, how it can be created and how it can be used. That's the first type of form. The second type of form that this system can handle are the forms with workflows, where you create a form, you attach a workflow or a process to it, and it goes through that approval process, and after it is the form is filled out and it's approved and so on and so forth, you can actually share the data with the other users of your system. So now let me log out as Lee and log in again as Roland and make the form, because Roland is the BPM manager, and it is Roland who can make the forms for this particular system. So I go to the BPM module for Roland, and now let me make a form which has a workflow attached to it. So let's say for this company I have a form which is a quality complaint approval form. So let's say we have a form something like this. It can be, these forms can be anything. It can be your ISO forms, it can be your FDA forms, it can be forms to any vertical that you are related to. This is just an example. So now we see that this form has 4 sections, and out of these 4 sections I see that there is one field which needs a drop-down menu, department. So before creating the form, let me create a drop-down menu called department. So I go here under forms setup, because remember only the BPM manager can do a form setup. So for form setup, the first link out here is drop-down menus. So I click on add drop-down menu, and I add a drop-down menu called department. And here I need to figure out how many departments does this particular form involve. It involves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 departments. So now it is asking me number of options. I say 6. So once I go to the second step, it will ask me what are the 6 options, that is what are the 6 departments. So the 6 departments are quality, operations, sales, marketing. So let's add them: quality, operations, sales, marketing. We have 2 more to go: service, and the last one is finance. So you can have as many options as you want for this particular drop-down menu of ours. Now if let's say we have 6 options. So now if I click on view drop-down menu, I see that this drop-down menu called department has been added. So against that, I have this action button which has 3 options: publish menu, edit existing options, or delete the menu. So if I'm not happy with the existing options, if I want to make any modifications, I can do so by clicking on edit. And if I'm not happy at all with the drop down menu and I don't want it in my system, I can just delete it. But suppose everything is fine, I go ahead and publish this menu. So now I can add this menu to my different forms. It can either be the workflow forms or the data entry forms. I can use this department drop down menu in any of these forms, and I can delete it only till the time someone has used this drop down menu in their forms. If this drop down menu called department is being used in any form, whether it's a workflow form or a data entry form, I cannot go ahead and delete this drop down menu. Till now I can do it because it's not being used anywhere, but in case it's used somewhere, I cannot go ahead and delete it. Okay, now let's move on. So now in this particular form, I see below that the way this escalation is going to happen, the way this the form is going to be approved is, it's a 3-step process. First it will go to the quality supervisor, then to the quality manager, and then to the operations manager. So and this, as we see, is a quality complaint approval form. So let us define a process out here. Second thing we do, we can define the process later on, then attach it with the form. But let's define the process now. It can go either way. You can define the process later on, and then while publishing the workflow form, you can before publishing the workflow form, you can add the process and then attach that process with this particular form. So let us add a template out here, a process template, a workflow process template, which we call quality complaint approval. Let's say quality complaint approval. That's the name of the process. So, and here company with which it is attached, our default company is Wild Mint, so it's already showing it. But suppose we want to attach it to Los Angeles office, we can go ahead and do so. So now description is optional. If you want, you can put in a description of the process. If not, it's okay. Go ahead to the second step. So in the second step, you need to put in the name of the step. So here first step is approval by quality supervisor. So I say here approval by quality supervisor, and let's what are the functions that this quality supervisor can do. He can accept, reject, or ask for resubmission. Let's see, he could also send it this form for a comment to someone else if necessary, or he can do a final approval. But let's say, since this is the first step of the process, he can just do 3 things. He can either accept, reject, or ask for resubmission, and it's going to the quality supervisor, and we have to select who is the quality supervisor. Let's say Trevor is the quality supervisor, and if I want to put in any instructions for Trevor, I can do so, but this is not mandatory. It doesn't have a red asterisk against it, so you can skip it, and you can keep on adding as many steps as you want. So this is the first step. Let's move on to the second step. The second step out here says that it needs to go to the quality manager. So I go ahead and put in the name approval by quality manager, and let's say he can accept, reject, resubmit, or maybe even send for a comment to someone else. If he's not sure about whether he should approve or reject it, he can ask for a comment from someone else. Let's say we give him that option too. And let's say who is the quality manager. Let's say Lee is the quality manager, and if I have any instructions for Lee, I can put it out here, but this, as you see, is not mandatory. And then this form also has a third step. So I click on add step and move on to the third step. So here the third step is operations manager. So he is the final approver for this particular form. So let's put in his name, approval by operations manager, and let's say he can accept, reject, resubmit, or send for comment and ask for comments from someone, and he can do the final approval. So he can do everything. See, these actions you can define based on your company's requirements. It's not necessary that for the first one you'll just select accept, reject, and resubmit, and for the second one you'll do a comment in addition to it, and the final one will be final approval. Not necessary. So however you want to do it, you can do it your way. And let's say Andrew is the operations manager, and if I have any instructions for Andrew, I can put it out here, but not necessary, as you can see. And since our approval process has just 3 steps, so we do a done out here. We have already added 3 steps. So if I go to view templates, I see that I have this template out here which has these 3 different steps. Okay, So now go back to the list, and now you can you see an action button against this form. You can either publish this workflow, edit this existing steps. If you're not happy with the steps, you can make modifications, and if you're not happy, if you want to add a step at the end, you can do so. But let's say you want to publish this workflow. So once you publish it, this workflow is available, and you can edit the existing steps or delete the workflow or the process till the time it's being used in any of the workflow attached forms. If it is added to a workflow attached form, you can neither edit it nor delete it. Now, one more thing I would like to show you out here. So whenever there is a view thing, view templates, or view drop down menus, in all these views you will see this gears icon on top. So clicking on this gears, you will and then after that on this building, you will see the companies or the locations to which you have access. When we added this workflow process, we added it to the company called WildMint. We didn't add it to Los Angeles office. So if we want to see if there is any workflow template attached to Los Angeles office, we can click on Los Angeles office, and we see that there's nothing attached to the Los Angeles office. So this way, company wise, wherever there's a view button, whether it's in drop down menus or templates or forms, you can always see the number of forms attached to the different offices. For example, remember our data entry form, the gate pass, which we added to the WildMint office. So now if I go to view active forms, I see that there is this form gate pass for vendors attached with the WildMint office. But suppose we want to see if there is any data entry form attached to the Los Angeles office, we'll click on this gears and then this building icon and click on Los Angeles office. We see that there's nothing available, not a single data entry form is available with the Los Angeles office. So for all these views, if you want to view for the different office locations for which you have access, you just need to click on the gears button and then on the building icon. So moving on, now we have defined the process. Now let us define the form with workflow, which users would be able to fill out. Now this is the BPM Manager who is going to define the form. So under forms with workflow, he clicks on add a form. So first thing, as usual, it's the same way you define the other form, name of the form. So let's call it quality complaint approval form. So we name the form. Let's put a short code to it. Let's call it QCA. And the number of sections in this form, here we see that it clearly has 4 sections. So we put in as 4. And number of document attachments. So does it have any document attachment? Yes, complaint detail with pictures. So let's say we want at least one picture, and it's attached to the default company of Roland. Since Roland is adding, he can also add it to Los Angeles office if he wants, but let's say we are working only with WildMint right now, so move on to the second step. It's the same process as you defined the previous form. So first thing is the document attachment. So if there's a picture of the complaint, any screenshot or anything, let's say we call it complaint picture. And is this upload mandatory? Let's say no, you can just skip it if you want. And then the sections. Remember, we had 4 sections, so now it's asking the names of the different sections. So this is the name of the first section, and we see that here all the sections are sequential. So we put it all as sequential. So the first section, we call it sequential. Second section is also sequential. Third section, same story. It's again sequential. And so is the fourth section, which is sequential. Hit on the submit button. So once we hit on the submit button, so now it is asking what are the number of fields in this different sections. So first has 1, 2, 3, 4. Second also has 4. So first has 4 fields. Second has 4 fields. How about the third? Third is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it has 5 fields, and the last one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that also has 5 fields. So moving on, now you'll have to define the fields. just as the previous one. It's a very simple process. So first is complaint number. So in the first section, first field is complaint number. Let's give it field type is, let's say, varchar, and is it mandatory? Let's say it's an yes out there. And the department with which this particular complaint is linked to. Remember, we defined this drop-down menu called department. Let's use it in this form. So here in the field type, I'm going to select drop-down menu. At the moment I do so, I will also have to select one of my available drop-down menus. Here I have just one which is available and which is called department. I select that. And is it mandatory? Let me put it as a yes. So the third field out here is complaint date and time. So I will put it as a date and time field. Then the next is complaint detail with pictures. Pictures we have already taken care of. We've said that we need a document attached which is a picture of the complaint, so that's taken care of. And complaint detail, let's put it as text so that we can put in a lot about, we can write a lot about the complaint. Second section is called service information. Here let's put in the service name. Here, if you would have defined our services before as a drop-down menu, we could have used drop-down menu, but since we didn't do it, let's use it as a varchar. And is it mandatory? Let's say yes. Service code, let's say yes as a varchar, and let's say a yes out there. Service description. So what was the service that was offered to the customer, about which the customer is not happy? Let's put it as a text, and let's put it as a yes. We want to fill in that service. And service date. So on which date was the service offered to the customer? Let's select the field type date, not date and time. We have selected date and time once. Now we are selecting date. Now the third section out here is customer information. So we want the customer name. Let's put it as varchar, and let's say we want to know the customer's name. Second field out here is customer ID. Suppose we give every customer of ours an ID, and we have that entered into some system of ours, and we want to enter that particular customer ID for this particular form. But let's put it as not mandatory. And then the next thing is telephone or mobile. So that's a field which we added as varchar, and let's keep it optional, doesn't matter. We can do whatever we want. And then the email ID, let's keep it as varchar. And the next field out here is address of the customer. So we put it out here as, and let's put it as text. So we're done with the third section. Now coming to the final section, which is the customer complaint. So is the complaint about third-party products use? And for all this, we need to use the yes/no option. So we copy and paste that particular question and select the yes/no option. Moving on to the second field, we just copy this information from here and put it as a yes/no. Third field. So we copy this and put a yes/no. Fourth field, and put a yes/no. And the last field out here, and put a yes/no. So now we are done entering all our field information. And now if we go to view active forms, we'll see that this particular form has been added to the system with our letterhead, and it has 4 sections. The first section is this complaint date and time. When you click on this, you can add in both your complaint date and time. Then regarding the drop down menu, you have all your drop down fields out here. And as far as the date, only the date thing is concerned, then there is no time. Then you have this calendar opening for you out here. And then whenever there's a yes/no, you have this yes/no field. So you have all your fields and your whole form in place. So now going back to the list of active forms, once you're happy with the form, now you need to, suppose you want to make modifications, of course, you can click on edit under the actions drop down menu. And if you want to deactivate the form, suppose it's no longer required, you can just go ahead and deactivate it. But let's say it's a good form and you want to publish it, and you want to your users to use this form. So you go ahead and publish this form. So before publishing a workflow attached form, you have to add the workflow template attached with it. So it will give you the list of published workflow templates. We just have one out here, so I add this particular template with it and I submit it. Now if I go back to the details of the form, I see that this is my form, and it has workflow attached to it, which is a quality complaint approval. Now suppose this particular user, the manager user himself, he wants to submit this particular form. He can do it either from the dashboard, where you have this under my workflow forms, you can click on view available forms and then you can submit this form, or under workflow form submission, below form setup, he has this link called workflow form submission, and there also he has a link called view available forms. So he can click on submit form and he sees whatever is available. So complaint number, let's say whatever the complaint number is, regarding to which department, let's say it's regarding the quality department. Complaint date and time, suppose this is the date and time, and complaint detail, suppose since it's a nail salon, so let's say this is the complaint. Service name, let's say let's suppose this is a service, and suppose this is a description. It can be a good description of whatever the service was done. Service date, whenever the service was offered to the customer. Suppose this was a service offered, and suppose that's the name of the customer, and this is the customer ID. This is the customer telephone number, and let's say this is the customer email. Of course, out of these fields, only this is the mandatory field. These are not, I can just skip them if I want, and these are also not mandatory fields, but suppose I want to fill them, I can do so. Is the complaint about the third-party products used? Yes, because the customer developed rashes. Is it the behavior of the staff? No. Regarding our hygiene? No. Regarding waiting time? No. It can be anything, yes or no. Regarding our price, maybe, let's see, maybe the customer didn't like the price too that he or she paid. And then complaint picture. Now this is not a mandatory field, it doesn't have a red asterisk against it, so you can just skip it if you want. And now you'll see that before submitting the form, you'll see that this has 3 steps. First is going to go to Trevor, then Lee, then the last is going to Andrew. So I click on the submit button. So now if I go to my forms, newly added form, I see that I have filled out this particular form with these values. Whatever I have filled up shows for me out here, and if I am really not happy with whatever I have filled up, I can go ahead and edit the values that I have filled up. But suppose everything is fine, it is still in saved as a draft. It has not gone for approval to the first step approver, which is Trevor. But suppose everything is fine, I want to send it to Trevor, so I click on send for approval. The moment I do so, Trevor gets an email alert saying that something has come for his approval. So I log out as Roland and log in as Trevor. So the moment I log in as Trevor and I go to the BPM module, I see that I have one form to approve. In this big yellow box, it says that one form has come for your approval. So I see out here that this is the form, this is a form number that has come for approval, and I see what are the values that this particular person Roland has filled up, and I can now go ahead and remember I had three options. I could either approve, reject, or ask for resubmit. If I ask for a resubmission, it's going to go back to Roland, and he again has to fill in the different values based on whatever I send as a comment, and then resubmit it to me, and then it's going to be saved as version 2. So this system has a built-in version control, so you can have as many versions of the different forms as you want. The moment it goes for a resubmission and it is resubmitted at any step, then it develops the next version, and nothing is deleted. The data for all the different versions are saved. But let's for this demo, let's say we this guy approves of it, Trevor approves of this form, and then he puts in his approval comments as much as he wants, and if he's doing it via mobile device, he can just use his voice. He can just talk on the mobile browser, and the mobile browser is going to type it out for him, and he just needs to submit it. And if he feels like adding an additional document along with his approval comments, he can do so, but it's purely optional. So he clicks on the submit button. The moment he does that, an email automatically goes to the second step approver, which is Lee. So I log out as Trevor and I log in as Lee. So Lee logs into the system and sees under the BPM module also, if right in the home page itself, forms to approve, he sees a 1 out here, so he can either click on that one or the BPM module, and he sees in his yellow box that there's something which has come for his approval. So he clicks on this and he sees that okay, it has been approved by Trevor in the first step, and this is what Trevor had to say, and he can see the values of the different form of the values that Roland had filled in, and then he can either approve, reject, or resubmit. So let's say he also approves, and he moves on, and he can put his comments as much as he wants. Again, via mobile browser, he can just talk out his comments, and if he wants to upload a document along with it, he can do so, and clicks on the submit button. So the moment he does so, his in the workflow data, you see that his information is also, his approval comments has also been filled in, and an email goes off to the third and the final step approver, who is Andrew. So I log out as Lee and log in as Andrew. So I go to the BPM module, and here I see there's a form which has come for his approval. He can see whatever has happened on the form before. Trevor and Lee has already approved it, and he can approve, reject, resubmit, or send for a comment, asking for a comment from someone, some other user. Then that user is going to get an email saying whatever his comments is, and it can come back to him. But suppose this user says, okay, finally I approve of this document, and he clicks on final approval, and he puts on his comments, and if he wants, he can upload a file again via mobile browser. He can just voice approve it and clicks on the submit button. During this whole process, Roland, the first approver, he has always been kept informed about the different approval processes via email. And under the form detail page, if we want to see the approver comments, we can always go ahead and see the approver comments. And this is the current version. It can have any number of versions. Since this form did not go back for resubmission, it's still running on the version 1. So had it gone back for resubmission at any of these 3 steps, this and when Roland would have filled in the newer values based on the resubmission comments, it would have come in as version 2, and this version would have been moved down, and the version 2 data would have been shown above, and version 1 data would be shown below, but no data would be deleted at any point of time. So, and if at any point of time the user wants to print this form, they can just go ahead and print the form in this particular format. They can use what is the print destination, either as a PDF or if they want to print out a hard copy, you can select whatever you want and you can print it out, and it would come to this many number of pages. So that's how the the forms are taken care of. And of course there are different search options, both with workflow form submission, non-workflow, it is data entry forms, and also with workflow forms. For example, for search, we have a lot of different options. You can search by form name or by form data, that is whatever data has been entered inside the form. Suppose I want to see if any data called Mary has been entered inside a form, then I see that nothing has been entered as Mary inside the form. But suppose I want to select a form by this way, I see that my form has given me certain results. My search has given me certain results. So there are a lot of different options. Even for the data entry forms, you can search by form name or by form data, or the different options that are available out here. And as far as reports are concerned, you can view your forms report, or your normal forms, your workflow forms report, or your data entry forms report. And as far as the BPM Manager is concerned, for example, this user Roland is a BPM Manager, so he can see more reports. So he can go here, he can go to BPM under reports, forms with workflow, he can view his reports, approvals due, reports by user. So he can view his reports, whatever forms he has submitted, let's say between this date and this date, how many forms did he submit. He can see this report out here. Or approvals due, if there are any approvals due between, let's say, this date and this date, he can see it out here. Right now you see that it has already been approved, so nothing is due. So similarly, reports by user, let's say for this particular user between this date and this date, what are the different workflow forms that this user has submitted, how many has been approved, how many rejected, everything comes out here. And reports by workflows, depending on the processes, he can figure out if what are the processes that are being used right now in his or her company. So he can say that there is one process which has been for this particular process, one form has been submitted and it has already been approved. So these are the workflow reports for the workflow related forms. And for the data entry forms also, he can view the reports, he can view his reports. If he has filled out any data entry form, let's say between this date and this date, he can view the report out here, but he hasn't filled out anything, so there's no report. And as far as reports by user is concerned, suppose let's see, I want to see the number of data entry forms that Lee has filled out between this date and this date. I see that he has filled out one user and he has shared it with the others. So this is basically how the system works. It's a very easy system to use, where you can create your own forms workflows and attach the workflows to the forms. That's for the forms that need approval. And for the data entry forms, just create the forms, share it with the users who can fill in the data, and then the other users can view the filled out data. And of course you have the different reports and the search options out here, and you can also switch between locations by clicking on this gears icon and the building icon out here, and then you can actually manage all your processes using just one system. And to log out of the system, of course, click on your name out here and click on sign out. To log in back to the system, click here. So guys, that's basically how LuitBiz BPM works. In case you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at sales@luitinfotech.com or support@luitinfotech.com, or visit our website www.luitinfotech.com, and we'll always be very happy to help you out. Thank you and have a good day.